All right, but let's get into our lesson. So what we're going to start with is terminology. And guys, honestly, don't try and copy all of this down in a panic. Let me talk you through it, and then you can just screenshot the screen, and then you've got the terminology. Okay, so don't stress about trying to copy everything down. Just sit and listen. I'll give you a second to screenshot all of this before we move on. Okay, so in geometry, much like in most sections in maths, there are certain words and phrases and terminology that we need to know in order for us to actually answer the questions. Okay, so some of these you'll have heard before in different sections of maths. Some of them you might not have heard before. Some of them we don't necessarily use a lot or very often, but it is still important to know them. Okay, so the first word or the first term that we need to know is a point. Now, guys, this is important because a point is represented by a dot, and that point gets labeled or gets a name with a capital letter. So whenever we are looking at a diagram, when we see capital letters, that is a label for a point. When we start working with shapes, we are looking at the points that make up the perimeter of our shape, the vertices. So when I say point A, we'll chat about this in a second, I'm talking about a specific point that we are working with. Right, 2 points can then be joined together, and this forms a line segment. Okay, now line segments again are going to be very useful to us because they eventually start forming shapes that we're going to work with. So we work a lot with triangles in geometry, and so when we start to work with our triangles, line segments will make up the sides of our triangle. Now again, because we've got the points labeled, we can label or we can name the line using the names of the points. So if we look at this example here, I've got point A and I've got point B. This line segment would then be labeled line AB. It is the line segment that joins A and B together. Right, I'm going to turn off my camera because some of you seem to be having an issue. So let's hope it gets better. So that's your line segment. It is a line joining or joined by 2 points. Right, then we start getting into the more complex sort of areas of our geometry, whereby we're going to see that we are going to work a lot with angles in geometry and the sizes of angles, determining those angle sizes, but angles is going to be very important in our geometry section. Okay, now, importantly, an angle is created using arms. Now, arms are basically line segments, okay? These arms, so 2 lines that meet at a singular point, they are going to form an angle, and they are called the arms of the angle. So basically, if you look down at this diagram here, we've got arm AC, arm AB, and together, because they meet at this common point A, they create an angle in between them. Okay, so arms, when meeting at a point, create an angle between them. Just take all of these scribbles off. Now, I've already mentioned this word before, but a vertex is a point where the 2 arms meet. So here is our vertex A. And remember, a vertex we also use when we start talking about shapes. So we talk about a vertex or vertices of a shape. So those of you who've been making 3D shapes, you will talk about the number of vertices a shape has. It is a point where line segments, or in the case of 3D shapes, edges, meet each other. Right, the really important one here is the angle, and I've already essentially explained this, but this is basically the amount of space that exists between 2 arms. So when we have these 2 arms of an angle, the amount of space between them is the angle, or the size of the angle. Now, guys, So like I say, these are the sort of important words that we need to know. And like I've said already, we work a lot with in geometry in grade 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12 with angles. And so it is really, really important that when we start working with angles, we can identify angles, we can label angles, or we can name angles, and we feel comfortable in doing so. All right, so I'm going to just stop here for a second before we talk about how we can actually start labeling angles. Take your screenshots. Remember, if you have any questions, please ask them in the chat. And like Yolanda says, if you have any network issues, remember everything is recorded. Yeah, this is our very first lesson. All right, so we are going to start talking about all of these things and so on, but right now we're just introducing it. I haven't asked any questions yet, so we're not trying anything just yet. All you're doing right now, guys, is taking a photo or taking a screenshot, and then I'm moving on. Alrighty, so there are lots of different ways that we can label angles, and it very much depends on the information that we've been given. Sorry, guys, I all of a sudden see that my formatting has gone all out of whack. Let me just move this away. Alrighty, there we go. So there's lots of different ways that we can label angles. Now, again, it very much depends on what information you have been given. For the most part, grade 8s, the way that you will need to be comfortable labeling angles is number 2, and generally number 3, especially in grade 8s and grade 9. But that doesn't mean to say that we can't use the other forms. So the first way that you guys are probably comfortable labeling angles is just with a singular letter. So if we have a look at our diagram, we've got the arm AC and the arm AB forming an angle in between them. And essentially, the point where the angle is formed, we then call the whole angle between the arms angle A. So that is angle A. Now, we don't use this very often. In grade 7, you guys probably used the notation with like a sideways or slanted L and then A, so angle A. But what we now need to be comfortable with in high school is this little hat on top of the A. So we write A and we put a little hat on top of it, and that says that we are working with angle A. Now, because we're starting to increase in complexity in terms of our geometry, what you're going to see is that often at a single point, there's going to be multiple angles, which I'll explain in a second when we get to example 3 here. And so what that means is that we can't just call it A. If we've got lots of angles coming from the same point, we need to be very specific about the angle we are working with. And this is where the second way of labeling angles comes in, and this is often the one we use. Again, we've got arm A and arm B. No, let's try those words again. We've got arm AC and arm AB creating an angle in between them. Now, yes, we could definitely call this angle A, but what we often try and do is we try and use the 3 letters that form this angle. So what we do is essentially we follow the arm. So we here at B, we go to A. This is where my angle is. And then we go up to C. If we follow that pathway, we are following the pathway of the arms that create my angle. And so this is why we've got angle BAC. Started at B, went to A, which is where the angle is, and then up to C, which creates my angle. You could have labeled it the other way, so the order isn't very important. You could have gone C, A, B. What is important though, guys, hopefully what you're seeing is that in the middle, the letter in the middle is always the letter where the angle is created. It's the vertex where my angle is. Okay, so as long as the vertex where the angle is in the middle, the order of the other two letters doesn't matter. So this is sort of this 3-letter method is the way we need to be comfortable with labeling angles. If we now look at the third one, and this is what I was saying earlier, we can clearly see that we have got two angles, angle 1 and angle 2, created at this vertex A. So we can't just call it angle A, because which angle A? Are we talking about angle 1 or angle 2 at the vertex A? And this is again where being able to label your angles very precisely is so important. So if we look at our first angle, and really it doesn't matter which one we consider our first angle, but let's go with angle 1 as our first angle, we can see that that's created by arm AB and AC. So we could use the 3 letters, B, A, and then C. That creates my angle, which is why I've said BAC. But because I've given you this number 1, you could also very simply just label it angle A1. Now, we only use this notation with the A1 or A2 or whatever if the numbers are on the diagram. If the numbers are not on the diagram, you can't just assign whatever you want. You then would need to use the letters. Okay, so very importantly, I'm going to say this again, and it says it here at the bottom. We can't call all of the angles just angle A because there are multiple angles at point A. So we need to be very specific when we have the situation. If we were to look at angle A2, we can see that's created by the arm AD. Whoops, don't know what happened there. Let's try that again. AD and AC. That creates my angle A2. And so that's why I can also label it DAC or CAD. Doesn't really matter. Okay, so when there's little numbers on our angles, you are more than welcome to just say angle A1 or angle A2. But if they aren't, we need to use our 3 letters. Again, guys, what you need to notice is that my angle labels all have these little hats on them. Okay, the little hat represents an angle. We don't use the sideways L anymore. We use the little hat. I'm sure there's a proper name for it, but we're just going to say that. All right, so someone asked a question about adjacent angles. Adjacent means next to, and don't stress about this right now, we'll talk about this again, but because it was asked, adjacent means next to, and because these two angles share a common arm AC, A1 and A2 are what we call adjacent angles. They sit right next to each other and have that common arm. Right, the fourth and final way that generally we label angles is with variables. Right, now this is what we are going to start to work with, especially in grade 8 and grade 9. This X is telling me that we are working with the angle created between, now there's no labels on this arm, but let's call this arm AB, AC, and AD. So we've got angle X created between the arms AC and AB. And then adjacent to that, or next to that, we have a second angle Y created between the arms AC and AD. It is the amount of space between those arms, but we've got angles there. Now, again, only if there is the small little letter, so the little variable there, can we use it to label our angle. If it's not, then we will have to label it using our 3 letters. Now, guys, you pick one of these methods. You don't try and label all of them. You pick one that works with the situation that you're given, and you use that labeling style. So as we start to do examples, we'll chat about which style we're going to use as we go along. But what you need to know is there's 4 different ways. Please stop with the reasons and with things in the chat. At no point have I brought in reasons. At no point have I given an example yet. All we're talking about right now is how to label an angle. And no, none of these are vertically opposite. So let's just wait. We will get there. But right now, all you need to take away from this is the labeling. So please take a screenshot, grade 8. I'm going to pause here in case anyone would like to ask a question based on any of the terminology or any of the angle labels that I've spoken about. Otherwise, I'm moving on. So if you have a question, you may raise your hand. Otherwise, you are taking screenshots. Elihle? There's a pop-up to unmute yourself. Elihle, there is a there's a pop-up. You need to just click on the pop-up and it will allow you to unmute yourself. Okay, I will come back to you to Tender.
Hello, ma'am.
Hi.
Ma'am, how come are we labeling the labels with the letters they have instead of their names?
Okay, so this is what I just said. It depends on the situation. If you are given X and Y, for example, we can just use X and Y. There's no need to try and write all 3 letters down. But if you aren't given X and Y, then yes, we will have to use the letters. It very much depends on what we've been given.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay. Pretty?
What is the name of the angles?
Which angles?
The 4 angles.
What do you mean the 4 angles, Pretty? There's where 4 angles? If you're talking about number 4, it's literally just angle X and angle Y. That's it. So this is angle X, this is angle Y, and that's all we use as our labels. Pretty, does that answer your question?
I didn't hear you clearly.
Okay, so I don't know what 4 angles you are talking about because nowhere here do I have 4 angles. So I'm assuming you're asking me about this last one, 4. And all I'm saying is that this angle down here is just angle X, and this angle up here is angle Y. That's how we can label them because we've been given the letters there.
Okay.
Also, just to add, because I think also she wants to know the names of what's the angle name there on 1, what's the angle name on 2, on 3, on 4. So Teacher Sam will get to that, okay? Because in my opinion, I think that's what you also wanted to sort of understand. She was believing that, you know, the row 1 there, where it says 1, it has a name, and number 2
Yeah, guys,
also
all of
has
these
a
angles
name.
already have names, like they're all labeled.
Yeah.
Here's the label, here's the label, here are the labels, and they are the labels. So they're all already labeled. All I'm doing is I'm showing you different ways to do it.
Yeah. Okay, I think that's it. You see, they're talking about, yeah.
Guys,
You guys,
yeah.
you don't need to be confused, okay? So it's only this page that you need to learn for now. So you take a screenshot. Don't worry about supplementary. Don't worry about all these different things because you've learned them from school. Teacher Sam will definitely teach us about them, okay, when we get there. But for now, don't panic. It's not everything that you see here and the lesson is over. She's continuing, okay? So we will learn all about it. Don't worry. Hey, my people, we'll get there. I know you want the juicy stuff. It's getting there. Don't worry. All right,
Elihle, no, that's all good. Thank you. Elihle, can we try again? There's a pop-up to unmute. Otherwise, you need to put your question in the chat. And then we can help you there. Elihle. Okay, Elihle, put your question in the chat for us and we'll help you there, okay? Or you can send Yolanda or myself a message. All right, guys. So, sort of the crux of geometry, and we're all stressing about angles, which really is not the main thing here that we need to worry about. The crux of geometry is being able to apply certain properties that are created between line segments and vertices and so on with regards to angles in order to answer questions. So we have what we call geometric reasons, and you need to know the geometric reasons. So this one here is our very first one that we're going to have a look at. And this is the reason that deals with angles around a point. Okay, now, if we think about what this actually means, this means that if I have got a singular point, as I've shown you here on the diagram, and I were to add all angles around it, so imagine a whole bunch of different arms coming off that point. If I were to add all 5 of these angles around this one singular point, I will get 360 degrees. And the reason for that is, as you can see, this creates a circle. And we know that in a circle, we have got 360 degrees. So our very first reason that we are learning, or that we're going to look at, is the fact that angles around a point add up to 360 degrees. Now, very, very importantly, grade 8, in geometry, whenever we make a statement, we have to give a reason. And what I've got here in the little block is our reason that we are going to use. So whenever we are going to use the characteristic of all angles around a point adding to 360, this is the reason that we will give for why we are saying that. It is because all the angles must add to 360, essentially around a central point or in a circle. So as we go along, you need to be somewhere. I would maybe have a separate piece of paper somewhere. You need to be writing down all of these reasons, all of these sort of geometric reasons that we are going to work with, because these are the ones that you're going to use from now all the way up until matric. So you need to know them and you need to be able to apply them. So I'm going to wait here in case you want to take a screenshot of that, but then we're going to have a look at some examples of how we apply this. Okay, so guys, let's have a look at our first question here. Now, again, this is what I was talking about in terms of angles being labeled. I don't need labels on these arms because the angle that I'm wanting to determine the size of is already labeled X. So our instructions here would be something along the lines of solve for X or determine the value of X. So now we have to look at the diagram that we've been given, and we need to decide how can we apply any geometric reasons that we know. Now, I understand that some of you have done this at school, and that is absolutely fine. But for now, we are going to assume that the only reason we know is this first one, angles around a point. That's all we know. We need to see if we can apply it. So let's look at our diagram. We can see that we've got a central point here, and we have got an acute angle, and then around the outside, we have got this reflex angle. But if we sort of put the reflex and the acute angle together, hopefully what we see is that it makes a circle. And so we can now make an initial statement. Now remember, if I scroll back up, we make a statement and we give a reason. There are 2 parts to any geometric answer. Now, grade 8s, if you want to, I would separate my page into 2 halves. It'd be so nice if I could draw a straight line. Into 2 halves. One half will have the statement that you are going to make, and one half will be your reason. Now, guys, once you've made or once you've said what your reason is, you don't have to keep saying it for every new sort of step of working out that you do. As long as the working out all carries on from each other, you only give reasons for each new angle. So the statement we're going to make over here is we are going to say that we know that if I take angle X and add it to the 310 degrees, I must get 360 degrees. Now I've made a statement. I need to say why I've made that statement. So my reason is now what I told you in this block up here. Remember I said this is your reason. The reason I'm saying that X plus 310 equals 360 is because of angles round a point. Now guys, this is maths, it's not English. You are welcome to abbreviate and use the angle symbol. That is absolutely fine. Sometimes what we do, most of the time actually what we do is we actually put our reason in brackets, but if you're going to separate your page, that's not necessary. Now we've made our statement. Now we're going to give our reason. We have given our reason, I'm losing my mind. Once I've made my statement, I obviously need to go and do what the instruction told me. And if we go back to what the instruction told us to do, it very specifically said, determine the value of X. So now this is an equation. So if you think back to solving equations, we know how to do that. We use inverse operations and we will say 360 minus 310. And so X is equal to 50 degrees. Now guys, because this is essentially an equation, you can double check your answer. So if you made this angle 50, when you add 50 and 310, do you get 360? Yes, you do. So you've correctly answered. So I'm sort of going to go with Mika here. I know that you all know it's 50, but what you guys need to realize whilst you were distracted trying to give answers is that what the purpose of me explaining this was for you to understand how to set up your answer. Unfortunately, grade 8, when it comes to geometry and geometry specifically, if your answer is not set up correctly, you will lose marks. So if you do not set up your answer properly and you're not giving your reasons and your statements and all the rest of that, you are not going to get the marks. So I really hope you were all listening properly. And if you weren't, you need to go back and watch this video. Please take your screenshots. And if anyone has any questions, only now is it the time to raise your hand. Okay, Elihle, try again. Let's see. There's a pop-up to unmute yourself. You need to click on that pop-up to unmute. Otherwise, we can't hear you, unfortunately. Okay, Elihle, I'm going to move on. We'll try again now, but please put your question in the chat or please send it to you, Lend or myself. We will help you, but I can't unfortunately sit here and try and get you to unmute. Nelson?
Hello, ma'am.
Nelson?
Yes, ma'am. Can you
What
hear
is the
me?
question? Yes?
Okay. My question is that what is LS?
Angles. Angles. Yeah.
Okay.
So remember I said we can sort of use symbols and abbreviate. This means angles. We're just abbreviating it with the symbol angle.
Okay, ma'am.
Cool. So guys, that's really important. You can use the symbol angle. That's absolutely fine. Verona?
Ma'am, is it compulsory to write the name of the angle?
To write the name of the angle. Do you mean like to write X or acute?
No. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, no, you don't have to write acute. No, I was just sort of saying that there is an acute angle, but no, you don't have to label it. You only do that if they ask you to label or say what type of angle it is.
Thank you, ma'am.
Sure. Tebogo, yes, PT, angles around a point. So PT is point abbreviated. Oops. Apelele?
Ma'am, may I please ask, is it compulsory to put like the reason? Like, can you actually lose marks if you don't put the reason?
Yes, you will.
Okay,
And the
thank
higher
you.
up, So guys, this is a really good question. Will you lose marks if you don't put the reason? Yes. At a grade 8 level, what often happens is we give you a mark for the statement and a mark for the reason. If you are not giving any reasons, you will lose 50% of your marks. That is a really, really silly reason to lose marks. As you start to move higher up, because we expect you to just be able to do this stuff as you head into grade 10, 11, and 12, what actually starts happening is you get 1 mark for both your statement and your reason, which means that if you've made the statement, but you haven't given the reason, you lose all the marks. So if you are not putting the reasons, you are losing marks at the rate of knots. Put your reason, please, please, please. That is probably the most important part of your answer. Right, guys, on the chat, you don't have to ask if you can ask a question. You just put your question there and Yolanda or I will answer it. Onisile, yes, some of your answers in geometry can come out as fractions. Doesn't happen a lot, but it can, so yes. Okay, Elitle, let's try this one more time. There should be a pop-up to unmute. So Karabo, you must ask your question. Leslie, I'm sorry, my sweetheart. I don't know what's happening. You need to put your question on the chat, okay? You're not unmuting and I can't unmute you. I don't know why. Sinyane?
Hello, ma'am.
Hi.
Ma'am, I was wondering for like all the questions, if you have to determine the value of an angle within a circle, is the reason always going to be angles around a point?
Pretty much, yeah. So that's like a really good observation. Often if there's a circle shape, you're going to use angles around a point because of that circle. As we start to learn more reasons, there might be some others that we can apply, but for now, generally, yes. Good observation.
Okay, ma'am.
I've just decided to mute myself. There was a question around where did the minus come from? The minus, guys, has come from inverse operations. You're solving an equation. So because I'm taking the 310 and moving it over the equal sign, it becomes minus. Sabiso, last question, and then I'm moving on.
Hello, ma'am.
Hi.
Ma'am, what if they give you an equation where it's not particularly a reflex, maybe it's around 180 degrees? Does it still add up to 360?
Okay, if we're talking specifically 180, no, but we will do that reason in that appropriate lesson. As long as it's all angles around a circle, then it will be always 360.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay. Just on that, guys, it doesn't necessarily have to be an acute angle and a reflex angle. That was just this particular example. What's important though, and so where does 360 degrees come from? It is coming from the fact that we've got angles all around a point. It's forming a circle, and a circle has 360 degrees. Okay, how did we get 50? We solved the equation. Grade 8, we really need to listen. So x plus 30 is 360. I subtract 310 because I'm solving for x. 360 minus 310 is 50. Right, let's have a look at another one. If we look here at question 2, we can once again see that we've got a couple angles. But really importantly, I can see that they all come from a central point. If you look here, all of the arms creating the angles all come from this one central vertex. And so if we went or traveled all the way around this vertex, we are getting a full circle, and that full circle is a total of 360 degrees. Okay, so that is essentially, okay, we'll try that again. That's essentially what this reason rides on. The fact that if you add all angles around a central point, you're getting a circle, and a circle contains 360 degrees. Guys, there should be no hands right now. I have not asked for hands. Please lower them and put your questions in the chat. Okay. Right now, I want everyone to be on the chat, and I would like a quick response. What does, I don't want answers yet, grade 8, please. You're going to confuse people who aren't feeling comfortable. Just hang on, we will get there. Please, please, please. What does the square mean? That is the only answer I want on the chat right now. What does that symbol, that square symbol mean?
Well done, my
Good.
people.
Okay, so guys, anytime we see this little square symbol, this means that we are working with a 90-degree angle. Basically, what that means is that I don't have to write down the angle size like I did for 60 and 70. We just expect you to know that when you see this square, we know that that's a 90-degree angle. Okay, so because we now know that it is a 90-degree angle, we can now go and work out x. Because if we have a look here, we know this part of my circle, we know that's 90. We know this segment of my circle, we know that's 60. We know this segment of my circle, we know that's 70. And the only segment that I have left that I don't know the size of is x. And so we can now set up an equation to solve for x. So again, separate your page into two halves, one for your statement, one for your reason. And this will ensure that you do not forget to give your reason. So the statement I'm going to make here is the fact that I know x, so here's my x, plus the 90 degrees, plus the 60, plus the 70, and of course I haven't left myself enough space, must all equal 360 degrees. I'm going to put that in now. I just want to, there we go. Must all equal 360 degrees. Now I have just made a statement. Because I've made a statement, I have to give a reason for that statement. The reason for the statement, angles around a point. As we saw, there's that circular shape. It's angles around one central point. I've got angles around a point. Now that I've done that, I actually need to solve for x. Now, guys, what we hopefully see here is that 90, 60, and 70 are all actually like terms. So let's just add them together because it's going to make our life so much easier. So we've got x plus 220 is equal to 360. And now because I'm solving an equation, I'm going to use inverse operations, which means I've got x is equal to 360 minus 220. Remember, when we bring it over the equal sign, it changes its sign. So 360 minus 220 is 140 degrees. And so what that means is that the size of this unknown angle x is 140, oh golly, is 140 degrees. And so we have solved the missing angle in this diagram. And that is sort of the purpose or sort of the goal that we're going to see as we go throughout geometry. You are often going to be asked to determine the size of an angle, whatever that angle may be. Okay, so what I want, I'm going to do that. What I want is for you guys now to try question 3 by yourselves. You can now put answers in the chat, do it, go for it, whatever you want. What I want to see though, grade 8s, is your answer in the chat. And next to the answer, put it in brackets. I want to know what the reason is that you used. Okay, now we've only learned one reason, so hint, hint, nudge, nudge. But what I want to see come through on the chat is your answer as well as your reason. Yes, remember answer and reason, please, guys. So put them together, like answer and reason together. I'll give you guys another minute and then we'll have a look-see.
Please don't log out. Don't log out. I see some of you are trying to log out. Don't log out. You have to do a poll today.
Also, this lesson is not over, so you shouldn't be logging out. Good, guys. Okay, so let's quickly go through this, and then you will see the poll pop up that Yolanda is saying that you need to do. Obviously, you know this. It's poll day. It's Monday. It's not a surprise. So we see we've got the central point right here in the middle. And so we see we've got these three angles around forming that circle. So again, we're going to make our statement and we're going to give our reason. We can see that x plus 110 plus 140 must give us 360 degrees. Why? And this is the reason that you should put down: angles round a point. Now we can solve our equation. So 110 plus 140 are like terms. Let's just add them together, make our lives easier. That gives me x plus 250 equals 360. And because this is an equation that I'm trying to solve, x is equal to 360 minus 250. And so that gives us a final answer of x is 110 degrees.